This special program was started last year, and now it continues in this batch also. We have with us DG IIMC Professor Sanjay Dwivedi ji. He is soon joining. Dean Academics Professor Govind Singh ji, Professor Sangeeta Panavendra ji, HOD Social Media and IT and Head Apna Radio, Professor Shashwati Goswami ji from Research Department, Professor VK Bharti ji from Publication Department, Professor Anil Somitri ji, Regional Director Amravati Campus, Dr. Anil Kumar Vadavathur from our Kottayam Campus, Regional Director of our Kottayam Campus, and we have a lot of other academic associate, faculty members from all our centers from Delhi, Kottayam, Amravati, Jammu, Dhenkanal and Aizawl, Mizoram. Friends, the topic of discussion today is a very important topic, that is Gandhi's economics. And we have with us an eminent personality who has been working on this topic, or we can say Gandhian thoughts, for the last over 3 decades. He has deeply studied Hind Swaraj of Gandhiji and reinterpreted his thoughts in a present context. He is Dr. J.K. Bajaj, who has been honored with Padma Shri by the Government of India 2-3-4 days only for his outstanding contribution to the field of media and education. Dr. Bajaj, please accept heartfelt congratulations from the IIMC for this special recognition to your services to the nation. मैं आपको प्रणाम करता हूं सर. Your contribution and dedication to a particular cause, it's definitely an inspiration for all of us. Friends, you must be having a lot of questions about economic thoughts of Gandhiji. We all know that Gandhiji was for village-centric development, but his thoughts were not accepted, or we can say rejected, by some of his followers immediately after the independence in 1947. Even then, his thoughts are still debated and discussed by the scholars worldwide, and they find remedies to so many ills even today. Whether his economic thoughts are still relevant and how can we practically implement them in present fast changing world will be discussed by our today's speaker, Dr. Bajaj Sahab. Before inviting Dr. Bajaj to start his lecture, I request Professor Govind Singh ji, who is Dean Academics in IIMC, to formally welcome Dr. Bajaj Sahab on behalf of IIMC. Professor Govind Singh ji.
धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर प्रमोद जी, परम श्रद्धेय बजाज साहब, हमारे डायरेक्टर जनरल प्रोफेसर संजय द्विवेदी, एडिशनल डायरेक्टर जनरल श्री आशीष गोयल जी, हमारे तमाम प्रोफेसर्स यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, आप सभी लोग, और उसके अलावा सेंटर्स के तमाम फैकल्टी के मेंबर्स और बाकी सारे जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं हमारे साथी, आप सभी को प्रणाम करता हूँ। आज जो विषय है बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट विषय है, गांधीयन इकोनॉमिक्स, गांधी जी का अर्थशास्त्र, और उसके लिए हमारे जो आज के अतिथि हैं, जो थोड़ा सा परिचय प्रमोद जी ने करवाया, हालांकि डिटेल्ड परिचय वो बाद में करवाएंगे। प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर बजाज, जितेंद्र बजाज जी हमारे बीच में हैं। बजाज जी का मैं पहली बार जो है 1984 में से जानता हूं, जब 84 या 85 की बात है, जब चंडीगढ़ में जनसत्ता के वो स्थानीय संपादक हुआ करते थे, और तब हम लोग पत्रकारिता के सर्कल में ये कहते थे कि इनका नाम तो पहले पत्रकारिता में सुना ही नहीं, तो बाद में प्रभार जी से मालूम पड़ा कि नहीं, वो बहुत बड़े गांधीवादी विद्वान हैं। और संयोग से मेरा संयोग ये है कि मैं पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी का ही स्टूडेंट हूँ, और वहीं से आप पढ़े हैं, और वहाँ आपने फिजिक्स में पढ़ाई की है। आपको हैरानी होगी कि फिजिक्स में पढ़े और पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी जैसे एलीट विश्वविद्यालय उन दिनों माना जाता था, वहाँ से पढ़े और विशुद्ध रूप से अंग्रेजी के माहौल में, और फिर उसके बाद जो है फिजिक्स पढ़ाया आपने कई जगह, IIT में पढ़ाया, पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ाया, कई जगह पढ़ाया, और उसके बाद गांधी जी को समझने के लिए चल दिए। तो गांधी जी पर इतनी मतलब वैरायटी, मतलब इतना पूरा एक तरह से फिजिक्स तो हमारा जो भौतिकवाद है उसकी जड़ है, और उसके बाद आपने गांधी जी को पढ़ा और समझा और फिर हिंदी पत्रकारिता में आ गए। तो ये हमारे लिए बहुत ही सौभाग्य की बात है कि ऐसे उद्भट विद्वान हमारे बीच में हैं। आपने पत्रकारिता में बस बहुत ब्रीफ स्टिंट आपका रहा जनसत्ता चंडीगढ़ में, और उसके बाद मेरे ख्याल से दिल्ली में भी थे शायद, और उसके बाद फिर आप सीधे सेंटर फॉर पॉलिसी स्टडीज मद्रास के डायरेक्टर बन गए। तो गांधी जी का जो अर्थशास्त्र है वो वाकई बहुत जैसा प्रमोद जी ने कहा कि डिबेटेबल विषय रहा है। गांधी जी जो है वो मनुष्य को समग्रता में देखते हैं, केवल भौतिक प्रगति या केवल जो एक तरह से जिस तरह से यूएनडीपी कहती है कि हैप्पीनेस का किस तरह का उसका इंडेक्स है या डेवलपमेंट का क्या इंडेक्स उसका होता है हर साल, तो एक तो वो इंडेक्स है, और एक हमारा है जो देश का है, जो गांधी जी कहते हैं कि होलिस्टिक डेवलपमेंट जो है, यदि आदमी गांव में है और थोड़े से में खुश है तो वो भी उसके विकास में शामिल किया जाना चाहिए, जैसे भूटान ने कर दिया है। तो आपने गांधी जी को बहुत गहराई से समझा है। गांधी जी का एक जो सिद्धांत है अर्थशास्त्र का, वो ट्रस्टीशिप में खास करके जो हम लोगों ने अर्थशास्त्र पढ़ा है और उसमें ट्रस्टीशिप को लेकर के जो डिबेट होती थी, उसमें ये कहते थे लोग कि हमारे टीचर्स, मतलब जो हमको अर्थशास्त्र पढ़ाते रहे कॉलेज में, वो ये कहते थे कि ये गांधी जी जो है वो ये व्यावहारिक नहीं है, क्योंकि जो व्यापारी है वो भरोसा नहीं किया जा सकता है। वो इतने जो गांधी जी का जो नैतिक शास्त्र है, आचार नीति है जो उनकी, उस पर जो है वो खरे नहीं उतर सकते हैं। हालांकि बाद में आपने देखा कि किस तरह से भूदान आंदोलन में लोगों ने अपनी संपत्तियां दान की, और ऐसे बहुत सारे लोग हुए जिन्होंने गांधी जी के रास्ते पर चल के दिखाए भी। लेकिन आम तौर पर लोग कहते हैं कि भाई व्यापारी जो है उससे आप ये अपेक्षा नहीं कर सकते कि वो स्वेच्छा से एक जो धनराशि है वो गरीबों के लिए या निचले वर्ग के लिए रख दे। तो ये इस तरह का डिबेट हम लोग सुनते रहे, पढ़ते रहे हैं, और आपने चूंकि जो भारतीयता का भी बहुत गहरा अध्ययन किया है, सनातन भारत और शाश्वत भारत, सशक्त भारत, इस तरह की पुस्तकें भी लिखी हैं और गांधी जी को समझा भी है, तो मुझे लगता है कि हम सब के लिए एक तरह से आंख खोलने वाला आपका आज का व्याख्यान रहेगा। मैं गांधी जी के बारे में क्या कहूंगा, लेकिन बाकी आप सब लोग जो है, आप सब लोग का बहुत बहुत स्वागत है, क्योंकि आदरणीय बजाज जी को ज्यादा से ज्यादा सुन करके हम लोग उनसे प्रश्न करें और उनसे समझें कि गांधीवादी अर्थशास्त्र जो है आज क्यों प्रासंगिक है। आज दुनिया मतलब गुन्नार मिडल है, शुमाकर है, ऐसे लोग जो है जिन्होंने कहा कि साहब जो है वो गरीब नीचे से जो है अर्थशास्त्र होता है, तो वो लोग कह रहे थे, या दुनिया के लोग, बहुत सारे लोग आज जो है फिर से भौतिकवाद छोड़ करके हमारी तरफ आ रहे हैं। तो क्यों आ रहे हैं और क्यों गांधी प्रासंगिक है? तो मैं इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं, और तमाम हमारे जो भी इस कार्यक्रम से जुड़े हैं फेसबुक में, यूट्यूब में और IIMC के हैंडल पर, उन सब का भी जो है बहुत बहुत स्वागत है, अभिनंदन, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Professor Govind Singh ji. You have definitely touched some very untouched aspects from the life and work of Dr. J.K. Bajaj ji. This program is definitely going on. It is live on Facebook and YouTube of IIMC, and a good number of audience is connected on those platforms also. Before I request Dr. J.K. Bajaj ji to start his lecture, there is an information for all the students. They can ask question. They should keep their questions ready. They can ask their question at the end of the lecture, but they are requested to type their questions in the chat box, so that we can, it is convenient for us, and we can also take up 2-3 questions together. Before formally inviting, formally requesting Dr. J.K. Bajaj sir to start his lecture, I would like to formally introduce him. Dr. J.K. Bajaj, Dr. Jatindra Kumar Bajaj. He's an eminent educationist and media person and celebrated author of the country. He has been honored with Padma Shri by the Government of India for his outstanding contribution to the field of education. Presently, he is Director of Center for Policy Studies, New Delhi and Chennai, and also a member of the Commission to examine subcategorization of OBCs. He is also a member of the National Committee to commemorate 75 years of Indian independence. He has been a member of the National Committee to celebrate 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. He is, as explained by Professor Govind Singh Ji, he is author of over a dozen books. Some of them are The Making of a Hindu Patriot, Background of Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, Hind Swaraj, authentic editions of the text based on the original handwritten Gujarati of Mahatma Gandhi, along with a verbatim Hindi translation and the original English edition. Scheduled Tribes of India, Religious Demography and Representation. Religious Demography of India, Timeless India, Resurgent India, a celebration of the land and people of India. Restoring Abundance, Regeneration of Indian Agriculture to ensure food for all in plenty. Food for all, Annam Bahu Kurbiyat, recollecting the Indian discipline of growing and sharing food in plenty, Indian economy and quality. These are some of the books. He has also prepared some different resource atlas. And Dr. Bajaj was born in 1952 in Punjab and received his doctoral degree in theoretical physics from Punjab University in 1978. I welcome Dr. Bajaj sir, and I request you to please start your lecture. Dr. Bajaj sir.
Dhanyavad, Professor Pramod Kumar, for a very generous introduction. Thank you, Professor Govind Singh Ji. I don't recall our association in Chandigarh, but it's good to see you here. The authorities of the director and of IIMC and several of the professors and directors of the IIMC's regional centers. Many of them I can see on the screen. There are also some of my colleagues who have joined. Professor M.D. Srinivas is there, and Dharampalji's daughter, Geeta Dharampal. I'm thankful to her for finding time to join. We have been very lucky, I and my colleague, Professor Srinivas, to have had the opportunity to read Mahatma Gandhi very extensively. Sorry. We, as during the introduction, as it was said, we tried to prepare a authentic edition of Gandhiji's the Hind Swaraj, which is the fundamental, to my understanding, is the seminal text of Indian civilization in modern times. And for doing that, we read his Hind Swaraj as he wrote in hand in Gujarati. And it was a great pleasure to see the words as he wrote them, and the tone that he adopted, because you want the kind of tone he's adopting while he's writing in Gujarati. It's almost like an old man sitting in a chopal and telling the people around what is wrong, what is right, what is truth, what is untruth, what is being civilized, what is being uncivilized, and is doing it in a very conversational fashion. It was a great pleasure for us to have been able to go through it. And of course, from there, we did a verbatim translation in Hindi. It is verbatim in the sense that we have put Gujarati in Devanagari script and then also word by word translated it. I think if you get the opportunity, I find reading that book is a very pleasing experience. Even if you learn nothing from this, it is getting in direct association with one of the Purvajas of current Indian civilization. It's important just to read him, even if we don't like him, don't understand him. But just reading makes you something better than what you are. And then later, we have recently published a book on Mahatma Gandhi. We have called it The Making of a Hindu Patriot. This essentially we have looked at his life from the time he went to England and even before that, up to the time he left South Africa to come to India. By that time, of course, he has become what he is. But by going through this period of his, we have been able to get an appreciation of the process through which he becomes what he is. He learns those things. And one thing we understood was that the स्थायी भाव जो उनके जीवन का है, the set tone that is behind it, that is dharma. And everything else that he does, it is a manifestation of his understanding of dharma. And to acquire that understanding, he does enormous tapas. I will not go into the detail of that, but sometime we will discuss that. I like to present what the kind of tapas he went through to understand what being Hindu means. And at the end of it, his dharmikta, his Hinduness is so patent, so obvious to everybody that somebody like Smuts stands up in the parliament of South Africa and says, look, these people, these Hindus, represent a very ancient civilization and they're willing to live and die for it. We cannot take them as barbarians. In fact, the whole exercise in South Africa of Mahatma Gandhi starts from that the colonizers there are treating Indians as barbarians. It ends with Smuts saying in the parliament that we can never take them as barbarians. They represent a great civilization, an ancient civilization for which they're willing to live and die. So that is a kind of tapas of Mahatma Gandhi and the kind of impression he was able to create of India in the world. I think I once said somewhere, I'll come to the main topic soon, but I once said somewhere there is a talk in Japan on Mahatma Gandhi, and there were fairly senior historians sitting. And they want to know, where will you place Mahatma Gandhi in Indian history? And I told them that for us, Mahatma Gandhi is like the Meiji king who brought Japan from its medieval times into modernity as Japan. Without westernizing it, he was able to. And Mahatma Gandhi did that for India. He introduced India to the modern world, and he introduced the modern world to India from an Indian perspective. That achievement, what he did, whether we like what he says, whether we agree with him in his politics or not, those are completely extraneous questions. He is in the modern times, he is the greatest Hindu that we have produced. And he has brought India into modernity as a proud Indian civilization. So that was the introduction. I have said so much because I have read quite a lot in the recent past of his own writing. And what I'm telling you is what comes to very clearly from the way he's writing. He was all of us, I was not much of a journalist, but all of you are journalists. And journalists write every day. Mahatma Gandhi, uh, uh, one of his great attributes is that he's writing several pages every day. After having done all the revolutionary work, having led great satyagrahas, I don't think there's an evening when he doesn't write something. So whatever he has does, whatever he is an open book. He has been commenting on it live as he is doing it. He is writing it down for us. So that to that extent, it is very easy to access him. One just has to read his words. Now let me come to the topic of today, Gandhiji's economy. What I will talk about in this on the question of Gandhiji's views on economy are what I think is Sanatana in what he's saying, what is timeless in what he's saying, what is the different ways of executing those principles. They can change from time to time. It can be village economy at some time. It can be some other way of implement those principles. It can be different technologies. It can be institutional frameworks can change. But what he is telling us is the basic principles which are unchanging, not for India. They are unchanging for the world if they want to create a decent economy, decent human economy. And I'll try to, as I have understood, tell you what those basic principles are. We all, whenever we talk about Mahatma Gandhi and economy, the first thing that comes to our mind is the austerity that in economic consumption that he represents. That is in his person that we always get this image of half-clad fakir living on goat's milk, and not only goat's milk. When he came to India, in India, amongst Indians, there is this tradition that when you go to a tirthasthana, you give up something. And after coming to India, he went to Hardwar. And the vow he took was that from that day onwards, he will never eat more than 5 items in a day. And 5 meant not 5 cooked dishes, but 5 ingredients. So which meant that if he had taken salt, that became one ingredient. If he had put the mixed masala that we use so often, he will not be able to eat anything else that day. So that is the kind of vow he took. So his personal austerity was immense, that he was practicing all the time. And personal austerity for him was important in any economy, in any society, particularly in the society that he was trying to create of satyagrahis. Because for satyagraha, as he says, you need ahimsa, abhaya, satya, ahimsa, abhaya, aparigraha, and of course, brahmacharya. And one of the foundational principles, attributes is aparigraha, non-possessiveness. And he thinks that aparigraha is so important that if you do not have aparigraha, if you are not detached from worldly possessions, then you cannot have abhaya, then you cannot have fearlessness. And if you do not have fearlessness, if you do not have abhaya, he says that you cannot be truthful, you cannot have satya in you. So for him, for a society based in Satyagraha, aparigraha is very important. So, and aparigraha is, in a sense, personal austerity. So that we all know that he is a man who stands for minimizing of consumption, mitvyayata, to consume in maryada se ubhog karna, to consume in measure, in limited fashion. That is something which is, he thinks, is fundamental to human economic interactions. That personal austerity comes above everything else, and it comes above everything else especially for a society that wants to be a society of satyagrahis. But when what we realized when we were reading him was that the personal austerity never for him translates into deprivation, want, scarcity. That's not what he's talking about. He is talking about mitvayata, limitation of consumption, but in an environment where there is abundance of basic needs. The first time I realized this was when I went to Sevagram. And Sevagram is where he settled down after 1936. That was his home from 1936 onwards. He had created that place in the way he thinks was a proper way to create an ashrama. And when you go there to Sevagram, you see austerity, but you don't see deprivation. You don't see, there's an abundance of spaces, even constructed spaces, open and big and clean. It never gives you a दरिद्रता का भाव वहां नहीं आता है. और ये बहुत अलग चीजें हैं. ऑस्टेरिटी और दरिद्रता ये बहुत अलग विषय है. और महात्मा गांधी दरिद्रता के पक्षधर कभी नहीं थे. In fact, he'll think of that as a sin. To have a society where daridrya is there, he'll think of that as a sin. Yeah. So in that Sevagram ashram, there's a small kitchen where he used to eat, and some 10 people can sit. Sometimes 15 people can sit. And when I was sitting there and taking my lunch, I saw that he had put a board on one side of the kitchen, and the board said, मित में खाना चाहिए. I don't remember the exact words. सीमा में खाना चाहिए, और उसके लिए इतना दूध, इतनी दही, इतना अनाज, इतनी सब्जी, वो लिखे हुए हैं, संख्या लिखी हुई है, पर्याप्त है. इससे अधिक खाने की आवश्यकता नहीं है. And when I looked at those numbers, there are such large quantities he's talking about that most of us, even those who can afford, wouldn't be eating that much food in our average diet. Because actually, in Indians anyway have become somewhat daridra in their nutrition. So what he's talking about is much larger. And since you are all journalists, I will suggest that before all this disappears, write a few articles on this kitchen of Mahatma Gandhi. I don't have a photograph of that board. Photographs of that should be taken, kept, because that is in a way a part of the history of India, modern India. And it also is a document of what Gandhi's economy meant. Then later, we came across this article of his when he was trying to establish a a school in Phoenix for children. This is 1908. And there he is, in that article, he is talking about what will be the requirements that we have to ensure for the students. And he's talking about all possible requirements, but he also talks about how much food we will need for them. Just let me open that. So he writes down a diet scale for the Phoenix school. And let me read it. It says it should include half a bottle of milk, 2 ounces of ghee, flour, maize flour, mealie meal as they called it there, pulses, rice, fresh fruit, green vegetables, sugar, bread, nuts, maybe mainly groundnuts. This is the diet he is writing that every student there should be able to, should be given every day. And as you notice, he is giving a number, quantity for milk, half a bottle of milk, and is giving quantity for ghee, 2 ounces of ghee. He is not giving the quantity for other things, flour, mealie meal, pulse, rice, fresh fruit, green vegetable, sugar, bread, nuts. He's not giving the quantity because these things are supposed to be in abundance. Unlimited availability of these things children should have, but they should also have, and that figure is very important. It says 2 ounces of ghee. 2 ounces is 60 milliliters, 60 grams per child per day. And you should try and imagine what 60 grams of ghee means today. In my family, I think we are 3 people. And if we talked about 60 grams of ghee, it will come to about 5 kilograms of ghee, 5 to 6 kilograms of ghee per month. None of us is taking that kind of thing. For most of us is not available. But for Mahatma Gandhi, this was a very sacrosanct figure. This 2 ounces of ghee available to every Indian per day was a very sacrosanct figure. He, when he was jailed in South Africa with other Indians, he actually launched a satyagraha in the jail to demand that 2 ounces of ghee is a basic requirement of Indian diet, and it must be made part of the prison diet for Indians. And he starved for perhaps 45 days to ensure that the government of South Africa at that time, the alien government, which was supposed to be very cruel, had to agree to grant this 60 grams of ghee per person, per Indian person in the South African prisons. That he said that this is our diet. You others take meat, others take this, others take that. But Indian diet doesn't get complete without that. So it must be part of the written down scale of prison diet for Indians. And he was able to get it. Now, if you look at today's prison diets in India, not in South Africa, 60 grams of ghee, if you provide to a prisoner in any one of these states of India, it will exhaust the whole of the ration granted to him, the money granted him for that day. So he is talking about, as far as the nutrition levels of Indians are concerned, as far as the basic needs are concerned, big houses, the rooms that you have in Sevagram are expensive. They're mud rooms, but they're expensive. They're not hovels. And the diet you have is expensive. It's rich diet that he's asking you to take, and he wants this for all of India. And in fact, my personal feeling, and we have done a lot of work on agriculture, is that if you could take only this one target for India, that we will build our economy in a way that 2 ounces of ghee is available to every Indian in, say, in the next 5 years, you would have made India an advanced country. All other things will come with that, because that will require a certain amount of food, a certain amount of production of cereals, which will be certainly at least twice that what we produce today. It will require a certain amount of feed being available for animals, certain number of animals being available, and a lot of industry to go around to maintain that level of agriculture and animal husbandry. You would certainly, I have no doubt in my mind that if we could make that as the simple target for India, that will ensure that 2 ounces of ghee is available to every Indian per day. We'll build an economy in that manner. Our economy would reach a different level in the world with this, in trying to meet just that one target. And he used to talk simple things. This is a simple target to meet, but you have to organize things in a way that it should be met. So this one is this, that he was talking about affluence of a society which is affluent in meeting nutritional and other basic needs of its people. He was talking about personal austerity, but austerity did not mean scarcity of nutrition, scarcity of spaces, scarcity of basic needs. That was not his, or scarcity of cloth for that matter. That was not his. So a society where there's personal austerity combined with affluence of basic needs, that is one part of Mahatma Gandhi's economics. The other, which we were surprised and we were not really aware before we started reading him seriously, is that he wants this personal austerity combined with public affluence. The kind of he never was miserly in spending on public functioning. He wanted public functioning to be completely unrestrained. Where required, it should be completely unrestrained. One example we have in mind is that in 1912, Gokhale ji went to Africa. Mahatma Gandhi was the host. Mahatma Gandhi met him in Cape Town, and he accompanied him from Cape Town to Johannesburg, which is about 1,000 miles, 1,700 kilometers it will be, 1,600 kilometers. 1912, which is a long journey. And throughout the journey, he sees to it that Gokhale's train is met by Indians at least 10 places. Indians receive his train at 10 places. At many places for that reception, he arranges special trains for Indians to come and meet him on the station. Now, a special train and tens of special trains in 1912, when the railways were in their infancy, it wasn't a cheap exercise. It would have cost a lot of money. But he didn't cringe on that at all, because in public functioning you have to have graces, you have to have affluence, you have to have abundance, and on that he didn't cringe at all. We were surprised that in South Africa in 1912 he is being able to arrange so many special trains to come from different places and meet this train going from Cape Town to Johannesburg. And later, of course, people have commented on his habit of, in India also, his habit of arranging special train whenever he was short of time or whenever a public requirement needed to be met. And every time it cost money. And people used to, there were these commentaries made that to keep him in his third-class poverty, a lot of money has to be spent. And that is true, because for public functioning, he didn't want any limitation on that. Public functioning has to be abundant. Personal austerity and public affluence, that is the mantra that he was following, and that mantra is the Indian mantra. But I don't know, all of you, those who are in journalism, should go to older towns of India, villages of India, and everywhere you will find where the landscapes have not completely changed, completely modernized, where the landscapes are still somewhat older, you will find that there will be, the village will have mud houses, thatched houses, but there'll almost always be a beautiful temple, highly architecturally constructed temple. And not only temple is the public space, temple will be a public space for all kinds of things. But there will also be gardens. Many of them in Changalpet we can still go and see in those villages. In the public domain, there'll be gardens, there'll be water bodies, beautiful water bodies. And so public spaces and public environment is highly affluent, while the private houses can be ordinary. And that has been the Indian way all the time. The private houses don't need to be too elaborate. They have to be spacious. In fact, in Changalpet that we are studying, every house has a very spacious backyard. But the public spaces has to be spacious, elaborate, and affluent. So this has always been a society of private austerity and public abundance, public affluence. And that's what Mahatma Gandhi, in his ways, is practicing all the time. So this is the third principle. The private austerity, abundance of basic needs, and then you have to have affluence of public functioning, affluence of public spaces. Those are three components of Mahatma Gandhi's economy, the kind of economy he will want. And there's a next component. Economy has always two components. One is production, where of course you have to look at demand and supply. The other part is distribution. And Mahatma Gandhi was very clear on this, on equity and justice of distribution. That, in fact, I will not, in this instance, I'll not paraphrase him. I'll tell you what he's saying on the question of distribution. He says, Satyagraha is an attempt to make the possible real. Truth implies justice. Truth implies justice. A just administration implies an era of truth or Swaraj, Dharmaraj, Ramarajya, whatever you want to call it. And under such a government, the ruler would be the protector and friend of his subjects. Between his way of life and that of the poorest of his subjects, there would not be such a gulf as there is today. There would be an appropriate similarity between the king's palace and the hut of his subject. the difference between the needs of the two would be slight. Both would enjoy pure water and pure air. The subjects would get sufficient food. The rural would give up eating 56 different kinds of delicacies. 56 भोग नहीं होने चाहिए. And be satisfied with only 6. And then he says, if the poor use utensils made of wood or mud, the ruler may well use utensils made of such metal as brass. उसको मिट्टी का अथवा लकड़ी के बर्तन मिल रहा है साधारण आदमी को, तो पीतल के बर्तन में खा लीजिए भाई, आप अगर बड़े हैं तो. For the ruler who wants to use utensils of gold and silver must be robbing his subjects. The poor should be able to obtain sufficient clothing. Let the king have more clothes, but let the difference be not such as to cause envy. The children of both should be studying in the same primary school. The rural should become a senior member of the family of the poor. So this is what he is talking about, that the distribution will be such that there, of course, there will be rich and there will be poor. Of course, there will be the ruler and the ruled, but the difference between the two should not be such that they are living in different worlds. That they should be enjoying the same fresh air, same water. A ruler can have 6 kinds of foods if but the roti, dal, sabji should be available to everybody. And if the ruler eats that, if the subjects eat in mud and wood utensils, the ruler can use brass. But that is all the difference that should be there. The ruler and the rich. In fact, it says what applies to the ruler applies to all wealthy people of a society. The ruler and the people, the wealthy and the poor, they should be a family. The rulers can be senior members of that family. The wealthy can be senior members of family, but others are family. In fact, much of it, what Mahatma Gandhi is saying there, it would be possible to quote chapter and verse from Mahabharata saying exactly the same about how a society should function. And Dharampal ji, perhaps many of you would know him, would give us many, many examples from the 18th century India of the relative difference between the rich and the poor, and the relative difference in the ruler and the ruled. And according to him, one of the constant complaints of the British in India was that the rulers here do not differentiate themselves in their clothing or in their food from the poor. The rulers and the ruled have that kind of relation, and they tried their best to break that. It is said that whenever they took over an Indian state, they increased the privy purse of the prince fixed by them was generally several times, maybe 10 to 20 times, what the ruler ordinarily would have spent upon himself, because they thought that was the appropriate ratio. So this is the fourth aspect of Gandhiji's economy: private austerity, abundance of basic needs, public affluence, and then equity of distribution. There should be a balance in the high and the low. And for him, that balance, as he has defined, is the balance between a brass vessel and a mud vessel, or taking 6 dishes and taking 2 dishes. It's the balance when it becomes 56 bhog or kuch bhi nahi. That balance is not something which he thinks is sustainable in a just society. That is not Ramarajya. Ramarajya has that is prakar ka संतुलन होता है। रोजे मैं कितने समय और ले सकता हूँ प्रमोद जी?
आप ले सकते हैं 15-20 मिनट्स आप ले सकते हैं।
अच्छा, नहीं, मैं 5-7 मिनट और लेता हूँ,
नो
तो
इशू, नो
उसके बाद
इशू।
एक प्रश्न। One more aspect of his polity, his economy that we'll consider, and then we will close this, and it will be good to have questions. The last aspect which I want to point out of his economic thinking is the easy availability of livelihood for all. वो दीनदयाल उपाध्याय जी इसकी बहुत बात करते हैं, हर हाथ को काम. But this idea of charkha that he gets, that is basically this, that everybody should have a source of sustenance, source of livelihood, which is easily available. From today's perspective, it seems to us as if this charkha was some ritual. It perhaps was also a ritual. It was an important ritual, important symbol of Indian nationalism. But all the data indicates that charkha, the time he was talking, when he was talking about it, was capable, Takli and charkha were capable of providing sustenance to a family that spin for a certain number of hours in a day. In fact, there's a famous, and I think this is another thing, another thing which the journalists should publicize. There is a letter in his, he published in the Young India of 1931. There's a letter written by a spinning woman to Samachar Darpan of Shantipur. This will be in 1928, I think. And she's saying to the editor, the Samachar, I am a spinner. After having suffered a great deal, I am writing this letter. Please publish this in your paper. I have heard that if it is published, it will reach those who may lighten my distress and fulfill my desire. Please do not slide this letter from a poor sufferer. That's a very interesting statement. This is the kind of faith people had in journalism. This is that I have heard that if you publish this letter, my suffering will reach the people who can do something about it. An ordinary spinster of Shantipur has that kind of faith in journalists and journals of that time. I think we should try to revive that faith of people in that kind of faith of people in journalism. And next, she says, when my age was 5.5 gudas, which is 22 years, I became a widow with 3 daughters. My husband left nothing at the time of his death, wherewith to maintain my old father and mother-in-law and 3 daughters. At last, as we were on the verge of starvation, God showed me a way by which we could save ourselves. I began to spin on Takli and Charkha. And then she says, and this she is not doing because Mahatma Gandhi is talking about. This is the way it was done. In a few years' time, I got together 7 Ganda rupees, which is 28 rupees. With this, I married 1 daughter, and the same way all 3 daughters. Nobody looked down upon these daughters because I gave all that was necessary. I gave all concerned, the Ghataks, the caste people, what was due to them. When my father-in-law died, I spent 11 Ganda rupees, which is 44 rupees on his Shraddha. And all this she was able to do because she could spin, and her spun yarn had a market. And now in 1928, the markets collapsed in the world, as in there was the Great Depression, and this Lancashire yarn started coming into India. And she's saying, now for 3 years, we two women, mother-in-law and me, are in want of food. The weavers do not call at the house for buying yarn. Not only this, if the yarn is sent to market, still it is not sold even at 1/4 of the old price. I did not know how it happened. I asked many about it. They say that Vilayati yarn is being largely imported, and that has destroyed the Indian weavers. So when he was saying spinning, take to spinning, this was not mere ritual as far as this was part. He knew that this is something which can provide livelihood to people. That livelihood got destroyed in the by the 1930s. That's a different issue. But this was what, when he took to spinning, he thought that this will give people livelihood, and with livelihood comes the dignity and the energy to fight for Swaraj, to carry out Satyagraha. Today, of course, in 1930, this got destroyed. I don't think we can now recreate spinning as a medium of universal livelihood. He was trying to do that at that time. But universal livelihood, the principle of universal livelihood, har hath ko kaam, is an essential component of all economies, all just and functioning economies. It is much more so of the economy that Mahatma Gandhi ji is trying to tell us to adopt. And so what should be that one question we have been trying to ask ourselves? If not spinning, what is it that provides that kind of universal livelihood in India? And Mahatma Gandhi gave thought to this question in 1945 at the eve of Indian independence. And he thought it is agriculture. And he's saying that one of the reasons why I have not laid stress on agriculture is that my knowledge of it is almost nil. And then he gives several other reasons. But then he says the fourth reason is that foreign power takes hold of the land, and through it controls other things. Therefore, government help is very necessary for improvement in agriculture. So that is one of the understandings of Mahatma Gandhi, and this is a classical understanding of economy, that there are things that people can do on themselves in the economy, but agriculture is an attribute of independent people, of an independent government. You need a Swatantra Bharat to do good agriculture. So he's saying, I didn't talk about agriculture because we were not our own masters. If we were own masters, the basic economic activity he would talk about is agriculture. And agriculture is one activity which is capable of providing universal livelihood. That is one thing which somehow, since independence, we have paid much stress to agriculture. Our total output would have perhaps increased from maybe 50-60 million tons of food grains at the time of independence. Now will be near 300 million tons. It would have become 6 times. But we have also become in numbers 6 times. So actually, our agricultural output per person has not increased. So my feeling is that if Mahatma Gandhi were around and looking at Indian economy, he will say, put everything you have in agriculture. Let us double which the government of India has been now saying, that let us double the incomes in agriculture, but not only incomes, let us double the production in agriculture. And you do that, there will be universal livelihood. There will be the abundance of nutrition that Mahatma Gandhi is talking about. There will be the possibility of ensuring that every Indian gets 2 ounces of ghee, access to that much. And there would be public abundance, because much of the public affluence that we see in Indian landscapes was built on affluent agriculture. I'll now close. There are 5 principles of his economy they have talked about. Perhaps these are very different than what you would have been expecting from me. First, an economy which is based in personal austerity. Mitvayata is fundamental. This solves all other problems of climate change, of all the things we're talking about. Personal austerity is fundamental. But second, that personal austerity in an environment of abundance of basic needs, abundance of nutrition, abundance of shelter, abundance of cloth. Third, personal limited consumption, but affluence in public spaces, in public functioning. That is also as important as private austerity, as personal austerity. Public affluence is equally important aspect of Gandhiji's economy, and I think that is the aspect of, that's the main principle of Indian economic thinking. And finally, an economy where everybody can contribute, everybody has easy availability of livelihood, that nobody is in a position that he doesn't know where should he earn his next meal from, or where he should sleep in the night. Now, this is, to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's idea of economy. The instruments of it, the institutions of it can change, but these principles have to be followed, and these are universal principles. Economies which do not have this cannot be advanced economies. Economies who do not have this cannot be sustainable economies. Societies that do not have this cannot be stable societies. And Mahatma Gandhi, after talking about some economic principles, he says that I do not want to separate economy from politics or from society. I do not make such distinctions as social, economic, and political. What is political is also social and economic. What is moral is also economically efficient. That is Mahatma Gandhi. That's Mahatma Gandhi. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. You have presented a very complex topic in a very simple manner. And I think this is the art that each and every journalist has to learn. Thank you very much, sir. You have discussed agriculture, doubling production in agriculture, and so many aspects, including charkha. Thank you very much, sir. Now we have received a lot of questions from students. I'm combining 2 questions from 2 students. Basically, they are almost the same. One question has been asked by Samir Ansari from Urdu Journalism. He asks, how can Gandhi's Gandhian economic policy proved to be effective for today's India? And there is one question from Himanshu Kaushal. He asks, as Gandhian economic order was based on simplicity, decentralization, self-sufficiency, cooperation, equality, non-violence, human values, self-sufficient village units, and nationalization of basic industries, is this economic order relevant in today's India?
In fact, this is what I was trying to convey throughout this talk, that individual institutional arrangements that Mahatma Gandhi would have talked about in his time may or may not be relevant. The principles are relevant, and those principles are relevant for all time, for all societies. And they are implementable in all societies at all times. So this question of distribution being of the kind he is saying, it is not time bound. It has to be done. Any society which wants to function in a dharmika fashion for it necessarily, but even a society which wants to function with, they don't have a concept of dharma, but they have some concept of ethics or even of functionality. Even they will have to go through. In fact, my personal understanding is all economies of the world which are doing well, at some place they have given, at some point they have given place to all these principles. Every society where the differences become very big finds itself becoming unstable. They keep on calculating Gini's coefficient all the time. They don't do it only for telling us that this is the coefficient, because that inequity becoming large leads to society becoming disturbed. And decentralization is important. Agriculture is essentially a decentralized operation. The more agriculture you do, the larger the agriculture is as a component of your economy. More decentralized will be your economy. Actually, decentralization and agriculture really go together. They are just one thing. And this is, again, throughout the world, and Mahatma Gandhi, of course, keeps saying that, the Krishak is a completely independent, self-regulated, self-sustained person. And more of the Krishaks you have. And of course, in the Indian literature, there will be, the Krishak is thought to carry the burden of the whole Rashtra on his shoulders. That's what Mahabharata will say. So the more stress you put on agriculture, more decentralized you will be. But there's nothing in Mahatma Gandhi's way of thinking which is not implementable today or ever. It has, whatever he has said, has to be sooner or later implemented. Should have been done yesterday. It's better to do it today. I don't see anything in his sayings, in his principles of economy, which is avyavarik. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi is a very, very pragmatic person. He's not saying anything which can be just said to be idealistic and no relation with pragmatism. He has to be followed. There's no if and but about it. There are no time bounds on the way his principles have to be followed. Yes, please.
Sir, there is another question from Anushka Snadia. She asks, sir, don't you think equity in distribution is a myth nowadays? Because rich are getting richer and poor are getting poorer. And also, what are your views on the food provided in primary schools under midday meals scheme? Forget about ghee. Those abundant rice, wheat, pulses, green veggies are not provided to the children, and malnutrition turns into no nutrition at all.
Okay. That's the second question. What was the first part of the question? whether equity is possible. Okay.
Yeah, equity in distribution is a myth.
Uh, you are right. Maybe we are not paying sufficient attention to equity in distribution. We need to pay, but I can only tell you that when you have high inequity, it's a highly unstable society. It is a highly unstable economy, and it is one of the public duties of the rulers to ensure that the inequity doesn't go out of hand. And while thinking of inequity, I think this, as Mahatma Gandhi is doing, uh, the inequity in essential basic needs should be separated from inequity in non-essentials. There has to be complete equity in, we have some data which shows that as far as the amount of food grains, ghee, good, and that kind of things are concerned, cloth, the difference between the highest consumption and the lowest consumption in India and certain areas of India from where the British obtained the data was 1 to 3. And in this level of consumption, the inequity cannot be sustained for too long. That has to be attended to if it is not being attended to. And it is not a idealistic principle. This alone makes the society functional. As far as this midday meal scheme is concerned, I am not that pessimistic. You are right that the more should be given. But that the midday meal schemes are available in the schools ensures that, in fact, from whatever data is available, that there are many children for whom that becomes the only warm meal of the day. And that is something which should be expanded instead of decrying it. It should be made wider, expanded as much as possible, because that has done much good to the children of India. One should criticize it, that is different, but that is something which should be expanded as much as possible. And I am happy to notice that the amount of public distribution of food grains that is happening today in the country, especially during the COVID times, has been very substantial. I think something like 85 to 90 million tons we are distributing of food grains. In fact, there's another issue on which the journalists should pay attention. There's a very big level of subsidized food distribution that we have undertaken, especially during the last 2 years, partly because of the we have this Food Right Act, or whatever it's called, the Right to Food Act. But this availability of public distribution of food at that level has ensured that the kind of misery that COVID has created has been moderated to a large extent. And that's something, again, which should be done more and more. Our understanding is more and more of cooked food needs to be distributed. And I have studied, or at least looked at, this Amma kitchen scheme of Tamil Nadu, what is Amma Unuvagam, that was started at the time of Jayalalitha. You should go maybe sometime and do some story on those Amma Unuvagam places. Very clean, run by women, and the kind of people, and food is being served in fair dignity there. And it's not only the completely deprived who come there, even most of the auto rickshaw drivers, most of the even this IT people at the lower levels of jobs who have to go around marketing. Even those people will be eating the places. I think much more equity otherwise is required. But we did that book on Annam Bahu Kurveta. Our understanding is that a continuous flow of Annadana in the country is what brings in equity and also brings in virtue in a society. So much more of public distribution of food in various ways, including public schemes, public that midday meal schemes, and also through this public distribution system, and also cooked meal schemes like the one of Anna Anvagam. The more and more we need to do in this country, and more of this we do, the more will be the demand for cereal production. Because one end is that people are saying that how can we produce all this farmers movement? There was a very major issue that the too much of food is being produced. That's why they are not getting enough. But it's not that the too much of food is being produced. It is that too little of food is being consumed. So if we distribute much more of food, cooked food as well as uncooked food, that will be a good public policy direction to take, which I believe will be in line with Mahatma Gandhiji's way of thinking.
Sir, we have a lot of questions, and I think we can take up 2-3 questions only. One is from Rahul Singh, who asks, basically Gandhi talks about personal austerity, but public spending in abundance, which means economic activity must be performed more by government than people. However, we are witnessing that governments across countries are moving towards privatization, more specifically in India. So your comment on it.
Okay. One is that it is a modern day myth where public gets conflated with government alone. The public is what today you people call civil society. I'm not very with that. So public includes the wealthier people of the nation as a whole, but it also included till the grama, the locality itself was a public institution. So all these temples which we see in this locality is huge. They are public in the sense that they have been created by the locality. They are not public in the sense they were created by the ruler of that area. There will be very few things which are in that sense created by the rulers. So it's unfortunate that in today's situation, the public space has become almost all the government space. But when I said public, or when Mahatma Gandhi would have thought public, that is a much larger, anything which is, the grama is a corporate entity, the caste is a corporate entity, the professional group is a corporate entity, and all of them are public. Whatever they do, only private is what you do for your home, public is what you do for your village, your local, your community. All that is public, not only the government.
Sir, there is a question from Indradeep Sen. How much caste is responsible for economic division in past days, and how much changed till now?
That's a very difficult question. I have been, for the last 5 years, more or less, engaged with this issue of caste. And my personal feeling, now many of you may be quite unhappy with what I say, is that caste in India has not been, in the Indian public space, its role has not been only negative. In fact, during the British times, much of educational resurgence that happened in India was through caste organizations. and was not a small resurgence. They created colleges, they created schools uh, at all levels, and even those castes which are considered backward castes today participated in this public activity of and the other thing which that caste is such a difficult question, but what I want to point out is that we have done in terms of caste equity, we have done very well. I have been in this commission and I have met many delegations of castes. The general feeling is that since the 70s, a diversity in the public spaces, in the public institutions, caste diversity has been achieved to a great extent. And more people come in the public spaces, we have more talent around. Everybody brings, every new group of people which enters IITs or the IIMs brings a new vision there, brings a new way of approaching things. I think we are, along with the caste, we have been able to handle this issue fairly well, and this will become part of contributory part to Indian resurgence if we keep handling it well. If we do not let it become a source of discordance, we should make it a source of harmony and resurgence.
Sir, I'm taking last question. We have a lot of questions, and some students they will not. They may be angry. They will not like it definitely. But I am taking last questions of this session. It is slightly different, sir. And you may answer briefly in 1 or 2 minutes. Sir, kindly elucidate the importance of Shri Dharampal's work for students of journalism in 2020.
Okay. That's a very good question. I'll take 2-3 minutes so that Dharampalji, we are celebrating his 100th birth anniversary. He was born on 19th February 100 years ago. So 19th February 22, we will be celebrating his 100th birth anniversary. Dharampalji was a very rare historian who was able to look at India from an Indian perspective. There's a lot of work he has done, but I will, instead of going into an overview, I'll tell you about 4 of his basic books on which I think the journalists should pay more attention. One of the books is about the science and technology in the 18th century as seen by outside observers in India. And that book tells you that there were, the Britishers were observing, the foreigners were observing, that there were, in the science, especially in algebra and astronomy, Indians were doing extremely well, comparable to the European. That was one part. But in various technologies, the British found that there was much that they could learn for improving the technologies there back home, especially in the technology of metallurgy. And one very interesting technology that's talked about is the technology of vaccination. And I just want to tell you, and this will be of interest to journalists, that the vaccination technology that is described in Dharampalji's book on the basis of the earlier articles of the British is that of smallpox vaccination done by the whole virome, as they call it today. That you take the virus of smallpox, degenerate it, and then use it as a vaccine. The vaccine that we have produced in India by Indian efforts of Covaxin is exactly that technology. So in fact, nobody else in the world has produced a whole virome vaccine only Indians have done, and they've done it very quickly. Both of them, the Krishna and what is his, Suruchi or whatever, his wife, both have been given this Padma Bhushan for that. It's an extraordinary achievement. But in Dharampalji's work, you can see that there's a continuity where it is coming from. And I think that is something that there can be continuity with the technologies of the 18th century. And they can lead to larger vitality of technology in India. That is one issue I think we should start talking about in our journalist circles based on Dharampalji's work. Much can be done in metallurgy to improve on the basis of what we were doing in 18th century. Much can be done in agriculture to improve our agriculture today on the basis of what is. So that was one book of his. The other major book of his of that period is on education, where he is telling us that in around 1824, 1825, 1924, 1925, the extent of public education in India, school education in India, was very high and very equitable, that all castes participated in it. So that is very important. But he is also telling us about what was the objective of school education and what was the pedagogy. In fact, though some attention has been paid to this idea that we were doing very well in terms of extent of education, that there is something to be learned from the pedagogy of that time and the objectives of education of that time. I think that we have missed, because what every observer at that time is saying, that in about 5 years of school education, the Indians are able to impart basic numeracy, basic literacy to everybody. Now that today we are unable to do. One of the major problem of Indian school education today is that even though we have almost universal enrollment, even after class 8, when people come out, most of them are lacking in basic numeracy and basic literacy. And that is something which Indians were able to achieve according to the records that Dharampalji has left for us. I think there's much to learn from that, and I think stories need to be done on that. It's an extremely important thing. These are the two most important books. There's one book on the civil disobedience movement, which is greatly significant, which shows that civil disobedience movement that Mahatma Gandhi launched was actually a continuing tradition of India. And there's a book he has on the Panchayat Raj in India, and especially on the debates that took place in the Constituent Assembly. All these four, I think they're relevant even today, especially the book on science, technology, and on education. And I have been requesting my colleagues, let us not look at Dharampalji's work merely as a restatement of Indian greatness. Let us also look at it as something which can provide us guidance in education, in science and technology, in governance today, and start looking at it from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. When we are discussing Dharampalji and we have with us Geeta Dharampalji, daughter of Dharampalji, definitely it is coincident, and definitely we are going to have special discussion on the work of Dharampalji next month, particularly around 19th February. You have rightly indicated, and I will discuss you, sir, on phone for a suitable speaker on this topic. So before closing, I am requesting Dr. Anil Kumar Vadavathur, who is Regional Director in Kottayam campus of IIMC, to please propose a formal vote of thanks. Dr. Anil Kumar.
Namaskar. beloved Director General Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, most valued guest of the day, Padma Shri Dr. Jitendra Kumar Bajaj ji, respected faculty, regional directors, and my dear students. I am humbled and honored to be the one for making the concluding remarks and proposing the vote of thanks to our distinguished guests. It's a privilege. But at the outset, let me express a special thanks to our seasoned moderator, Pramod ji, for making my task comfortable by beautifully summing up the oration. And respected Jitendra Kumar ji, I do not know how to express our heartfelt gratitude to you for your valuable words of wisdom, really inspiring and thought-provoking. The words reflect your deeds in making Gandhian economy a reality, in the making of a resurgent India. So to make the dreams of Mahatma Gandhi a reality, a holistic development based on grassroots level, village level development called Antyodaya, the development of the poorest of the poor. And sir, we can sense your passion and commitment for the ideals of Gandhism in your words. Excuse me. In your words, and I'm sure that's why a reputed theoretical physicist like you become an icon of social development and Gandhism. On behalf of IIMC fraternity, sir, let me express our gratitude for your valuable time and inspiring ideas. Professor Sanjay Dwivedi ji, our beloved DG and our team leader, needs no formal vote of thanks, but it's my privilege to express our thanks for not only incorporating the mantra Haim Anobhadra Krato Yendu Vishwa, that is, let noble thoughts come to us from all directions, but for making it a reality through these Friday dialogues. Thank you, Professor Govindji, Dean Academics of IIMC, and a versatile journalist and reputed academic, for your beautiful welcome speech. Our gratitudes are also due to Professor Pramod ji, the moderator, well-known journalist and pedagogue. For him, I think moderation is an art and a craft. And he's an expert in moderation also. Special thanks are due. And I would also like to express the gratitude of our fraternity to Dr. Geeta Dharampal, a reputed Gandhian scholar and researcher, and daughter of renowned Dharampal ji, and Sri M.D. Srinivas ji of the Center for Policy Studies. Thanks are also due to our respected ADG, Sri Ashish Goyal ji also. Let me conclude. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, regional directors, faculty members, and students who actively participated in this program. Thank you and धन्यवाद.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. सर बहुत अच्छा लगा बजाज साहब.
ठीक.
थोड़ा कोविड की स्थिति है, नहीं तो हम आपको कैंपस में बुलाकर